Welcome, everybody. I'm Greg Javer. I write at Ed Wood Wednesdays at the Dead to Rights blog, which my partner there, the proprietor of the blog, who's going to intro himself in a moment, also the host of Ed Wood Summit podcast on YouTube for the last couple of years. And we're going to talk today about Shotgun Wedding.
Hi, I'm Joe Blevins. I'm the creator of Ed Wood Wednesdays, a series of articles about the life and work of Edward D. Wood Jr. And of course, I had to talk about this marvelous movie from 1963. There's the title, Shotgun Wedding. And first, might I say, what a gorgeous print we are enjoying today, Greg.
It is. It's astounding. It really allows you to appreciate the movie in a different way than what we've seen previously. Not only so properly formatted in the right screen ratio, we can see all the credits unlike the previous video versions, but the colors, as you'll see, are quite rich throughout. A lot of really nice deep focus photography. I appreciated this movie cinematically more so than ever.
I feel like we're seeing this movie for the first time. This movie has been available in various semi-legitimate editions over the years, but we've never really seen it properly because it's always been terribly cropped or terribly faded or both. We've never seen the full screen compositions like we're seeing on this transfer of the film. So Ed Wood fans of today, you have no idea how lucky you are. We in the past had to suffer through bad bootleg quality prints of this movie, and you're seeing this absolutely gorgeous print. And there he is, the director of photography, Paul Ivano, a true professional whose credits go back to the 1920s. But by the 1960s, he was doing a lot of television shows, things like Family Affair and Please Don't Eat the Daisies. And I remember sitting through those shows a lot when I was a kid, because when you're a kid, you'll sit through anything. And of course, we're seeing photographed at Superstition Mountain Studio in Phoenix, Arizona, and directed by the great Boris Petrov. This was his last movie, Greg. This was it for Boris.
And he's credited here as Boris Petrov. Previous credits often credited as Brooke L. Peters. Mostly his film work is mostly distributed across the 1950s. But yeah, this is his final film.
And what a film to go out on. And what an actress to go out on here. The wonderful Valerie Allen, right, as Melanie, our bad girl. And here's what I'm talking about, this wonderful print. Look at this beautiful red sweater that she's wearing. Ed Wood would have appreciated that. And can we take a moment to talk about our star, Mr. J. Pat O'Malley from Lancashire, England. A wonderful English character actor. You probably know him best from all his work in the Disney movies. He was a voice in so many of the Disney movies of the 60s, like 101 Dalmatians and The Jungle Book and Mary Poppins and Alice in Wonderland. And around the same time, he's, working for Boris Petrov, doing this kind of sleazy, Erskine Caldwell-esque hillbilly romp.
Now, you listen, honey, don't you go talking like a fool. Ain't you forgetting you got to do like I tell you? You just get that stuff off that pole.
The accents in this movie are all over the place.
I ain't gonna do it. I've had it up to here. First I thought
I don't know if either one of these actors really nailed it. We were talking about who has the worst accent in the film, and it might be Valerie Allen there because I believe she was a New York actress. None of these actors are Southern.
We can presume, though, Joe, that her character actually may have hailed from New Orleans, right? Because that's where she was lived when she worked for the carnival. I'm being very charitable.
Well,
I'm being very charitable.
Oh gosh! And here's hopeless Peter Colt, I believe is the actor's name, as Shub. He's sort of the Jethro Bodine / Lil Abner of this movie, the big dumb galoot. He looks a lot like Max Baird Jr. He looks like if you got the discount version of Max Baird Jr., at Kmart. He's the Kmart version of that. He might give actually the least fluid performance of the main actors.
He has a pained expression on his face throughout, as if he's got indigestion or...
Yes.
What's eating you, woman?
You had to hand it to Boris Petrov. He got two of Hollywood's all-time most prolific character actors. We have J. Pat O'Malley, but later we will have the most ubiquitous character actor of all time, I think, William Shallert, who is in everything.
Why go asking for trouble?
We haven't even gotten to him yet. You see this sort of discord between Buford and Melanie here.
Well, now.
This, to me, is prime Ed Wood, because the characters who cohabit in Ed Wood's movies are often arguing and always fighting, and the women want something more out of life. They're restless and they want to get away. And this is something you find not only in his films, but in his short stories and novels as well. I think this is actually closer to his literary work than most of his other film work, because you see, not only this film has backwoods characters who talk like something out of Hee Haw or the Beverly Hillbillies. Obviously, Ed Wood had no idea how these characters talked, but Ed would write characters like that in his short stories and his novels. He liked to write that kind of dialogue, that very corn-pone dialogue. You'll have later on a phony preacher who's really in it for sleazy ulterior motives. That's the kind of character that Ed loved to have in his novels and short stories. Sleazy, debauched preachers, and we'll get one of those. Melanie's past here is that she was a carnival worker, and Ed always claimed that he worked for a carnival. Has this now been debunked that he ever actually worked for one?
Not that I know of. I think it's still on the mythology list. It may or may not have happened.
He always claimed that he had, but he was for sure obsessed with carnivals. And he writes them into his novels as often as he can. So you get novels like Sideshow Siren and Merry Go Round and Carnival Piece that all take place in this world of carnivals. Ed was obviously fascinated with that stuff.
That would be from his sort of unknown period, that period of time after World War II. He returned to Poughkeepsie briefly and then hit the road and landed in Hollywood sometime by perhaps late 1948. So we have roughly a year and a half, or give or take, where he's unaccounted for. And there's all kinds of stories, including being the half man, half woman at the traveling carnival. Also, that he studied dance with Martha Graham, that he may have gone to college. Right? Many things he did in that short period of time.
There's many stories of what he might have done, but I think very little truth to it. Now, this print is so good that for the first time, I could tell that there are actually pinups on the wall back there. You couldn't see those in the previous versions. And here's the father and the son having an argument.
Those are clearly pinups from contemporary magazines at the time. This movie is produced in 1963. But it begs the question, Joe, and I hadn't thought of it. What year would you think this movie is supposed to be set in?
I think that the first big wave of hillbilly-based entertainment came around during the 1930s.
Right.
You had the Erskine Caldwell novels like Tobacco Road and God's Little Acre, and you had comic strip characters like Lil Abner and Big Leviticus and Snuffy Smith. I think that is sort of when this is happening, because you'll see later there is a car that actually has to be cranked up by hand to start. That is an indication that perhaps this film is taking place in the 1930s.
Right.
But this character here, this is Lucianne. She's the other daughter. She's the kind of neglected female character in this. Her outfit seems to be very, very similar to what Donna Douglas was wearing on the Beverly Hillbillies. But I would say that both this character and Ellie Mae Clampett owe a debt of gratitude to Al Capp and his comic strip Lil Abner and the character of Daisy May. So now here's what I was talking about. Here is William Schallert. Obviously, people know him as the dad, Martin Lane on the Patty Duke Show. That was a little bit after this, but William Schallert was in everything.
388 credits on the IMDb. And he lived to be nearly 100 and was still active, fairly active right to the end.
He was still acting on shows well into the 2010s. Acting was just in this man's veins. He was even president of the Screen Actors Guild for a while. And just like J. Pat O'Malley, who turns up in the darndest places, William Schallert turns up in the darndest places. One of the first things where I'd ever seen him outside of the Patty Duke Show was a movie called Tunnel Vision, where he plays the host of a candid camera type show. This is a dark comedy, so people die in this version of Candid Camera, and they still laugh it off as what a big joke. William Schallert is the guy hosting the deadly Candid Camera type show.
He's also in The Trouble with Tribbles, the beloved Star Trek episode from the original series, probably one of the most beloved episodes of them all. If you go down through his filmography, you'll say, I've seen this guy literally dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times.
Well, the thing where he really influenced me was all the commercials that he did. He narrated so many TV and radio commercials. Now, here we have two very interesting actors. On the left here is Jenny Maxwell as Honeybee, or ingenue, and on the right we have Jackie Searle as Silas, her overprotective father. Now, you'd never guess it, but Jackie Searle was a child actor, a former child actor who just grew out of being a kid. His most famous movie that he was in the Jackie Coogan version of Huckleberry Finn. But Jackie was always cast as bratty kids. You know, he was called the Sandbox Attila or the Snitching Sissy. So that was the kind of guy he plays. Well, you can see he's still a nasty, ornery guy here, but he's just grown out of being a cute kid. And, of course, the actress here is our ingenue Honeybee, played by the tragic Jenny Maxwell. And her greatest claim to fame was probably playing a supporting role in an Elvis Presley movie, Blue Hawaii, just a couple years before this.
Ultimately, a tragic end comes in 1981, where a supposed botched robbery, both her and her then husband, her second husband, were shot. She was shot in the head, and he was shot in the stomach. And the Hollywood Babylonish rumors swirl around that one, if you want to Google it, because there's the possibility that, in fact, someone wanted her done in, and that her husband might have been mob involved. Her husband also previously had discovered the body of Nick Adams after his supposed overdose, because you dig a little bit more on that one and you'll find another tale where quite possibly, or rumor mill says, that Nick Adams was actually murdered.
I knew that there was something special about this actress, because as soon as I started looking into her career, I found all these kind of artfully filmed pinup type shots of her, and I was thinking, oh, wow, this actress must have been really beloved in her day. You see her here, and you can see how people were excited about this young actress. She worked a lot in television in the 1960s, but then she got out of the business as she got married. And now here's what you have to have in your stories about backwoods Southern characters.
An outhouse.
You have the old-fashioned outhouse, and of course the shotgun. I don't know that the makers of this movie, Boris Petrov or Ed Wood, actually quite understood what a shotgun wedding actually is, because they never get it quite right. Now, these, I guess, are the mountains of Arizona in the background here. I think they're supposed to be standing in for the Appalachians. Oh, and of course you have the You have Shub or Chub. We couldn't decide if this character is supposed to be named Shub or Chub.
Yeah, a little later on is when they start to refer to him a little bit more frequently as Chub as opposed to Shub.
And he's, of course, eating a giant slice of watermelon. You see, that's why I think now that we're seeing this movie in full color, it looks more than ever like a Lil Abner Sunday comic strip. Look at these beautiful reds and blues.
Even just the composition of that shot's very thoughtful and very well done.
Yes. I'd never seen this movie looking even halfway presentable, so I was stunned when I got to look at this print. Now, don't get too many ideas. These characters are supposed to be brother and sister here. So,
although he threatens her life incessantly, as you
yes.
know.
Well, I guess they're bringing sibling rivalry to the screen. This actress, I think her name was Nan.
Yes, Nan.
But she was another actress who appeared in a lot of TV shows in the 50s and 60s, including The Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, Gunsmoke. Nan Peterson was the lady's name. And here's our male ingenue. Yes, our Romeo and Juliet characters. We have our Capulets and the Montagues are basically mountain people and river people in this thing. And our very boring Romeo is, I believe, an actor named Buzz Miller. He was kind of on the back end of his career. Again, plenty of film and TV credits. You know what really stands out to me when I see this film now is how professional it really all looks and how presentable it was. This, if you at least showed it at a drive-in, it would at least look good up there on the screen. And I think in the past, when Ed Wood fans have gone back and tried to sit through this thing, they've been sitting through the bad and blurry versions of this, and they found it to be absolute torture to sit through. This film is only a little bit over an hour.
Right.
I think the thing that gives away that the fact that this is not really a film down south is that it's just sand wherever they go. It's just desert wherever they go in this movie. So I don't know if maybe it's supposed to have been a horrible drought that hit this version of the South. But then again, this town, Mudcat Landing, where this is all supposedly taking place. First of all, for a town of 47 people, it seems to have a pretty good infrastructure. When you go to the downtown, it looks like a pretty presentable downtown. It doesn't look like a town of 47 people. Well, you know what I think must have happened? In the credits, they say filmed at Superstition Mountain Studio in Phoenix, Arizona. It looks like maybe a standard Western town set was put up out there, and then just anybody could use it. But I don't know that they got too many takers. I don't know that too many film crews wanted to go out to Arizona and film this stuff, because here you can see these poor actors. They are just roasting. And I think that the heat is playing havoc on their hair, for one thing. Poor Rafe, his hair is getting away from him. But these are our goody two-shoes. We see Honeybee here. Well, she's kissing the guy, which this is about. Enjoy that shot, viewers, because that's about all you're going to get. Now, see, this is where you get real comic booky, where the dad is looking through he's looking through the branches, and now he just comes through toting that shotgun and shooting. And no one ever gets shot or injured or anything in this movie. We were talking about Hicksploitation, and that's what really this is. I mean, because of the Paul Henning shows, Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, backwoods and country kind of stories were in the 1960s. And of course, the filmmakers of that era, they jumped in. So you had Hick stories from Herschel Gordon Lewis, and you had Hick stories from Ross Meyer, and you had Hick stories from producer Harry Novak. But, Greg, we were talking about the two elements that Boris Petrov forgot to put in this movie.
Sex and violence.
There's no sex and there's no violence. So that's what I wondered who this film was for. Because the TV shows that I just mentioned, they're throwing jokes at you 90 miles a minute. This film isn't like that at all. I mean, there's some mildly amusing stuff. And in fact, we'll have some amusing conversations between J. Pat O'Malley and William Schallert. If there's such a thing as good acting in this movie, it's between those two actors because they're the most in control of their craft. But here, this is supposed to be a sort of a dramatic confrontation between two brothers, and the sister, of course, coming in between them to break it up. And all this fuss over money in the movie, $100, I think is considered a big amount of money.
Went a long way then. Certainly went a long way. Here he is.
Now,
the preacher.
there he is.
Preacher Perkins.
Also known as Stacko Perkins. But see, the closest thing you get to smut is William Schallert checking out her ass, I guess.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of shot where you can really appreciate the print of the movie. Like, William Schallert is just standing there with his red handkerchief and his light-colored suit against the blue sky. I was like, this is finally how a Shotgun Wedding is supposed to look. But everything out of this looks like clip art, you know? The cow, the milkmaid here, the Southern preacher. It just all looks like something out of a comic book. William Schallert generally played nice guys, trustworthy guys. And he's played priests before. He's in a lot of films. Joe Dante loved to use him. Joe Dante put him in Inner Space and Gremlins. And he's even in the Twilight Zone movie, in the It's a Good Life segment, the creepy little boy who has the power to control the adults with his mind.
Well, in that case, maybe I shouldn't waste too much time. Where could I find you, Paul?
Just go down that path. You find a house.
They did a version of that for the Twilight Zone movie, and Joe Dante directed it, and he put William Schallert into it as one of the adults who has to kowtow to this little kid. But I think William Schallert is having a blast here getting to play a sleazeball for once in his life. He doesn't have to be Mr. Nice Guy. He doesn't have to be the trustworthy dad. For once, he can just be the unrepentant sleazeball. He's trying to hit up something here with Lucienne, but it never really comes to anything.
No, she seemed immediately smitten, and a little bit later on, we'll see that she still seems to feel that way. But yeah, she is a key character in the sense that she ends up, in a way, being the one who solves a lot of other people's problems, but she gets nothing out of it.
This will sound ridiculous to you, Greg, but you know what the structure and the plot of this movie actually remind me of? Is Shakespearean comedies. And I thought Shakespeare himself would have appreciated the ending of this movie that's coming up, where all the problems are sort of sorted out and, you know, the couples are paired up and all the people's fates are decided within about 5 minutes here. And that was the kind of ending that Shakespeare loved to put on his comedies. This is the scene that I would say is the best example of acting in the whole movie, where they're talking about moonshine being a sin. And of course, they have to have J. Pat O'Malley carrying around the jug of moonshine. Now, when J. Pat O'Malley takes off his hat, I don't know if he will do it in this scene. I hope he does. You'll get to see that what he really looks like is a bloated George Carlin. Through this whole movie, I could not stop thinking of George Carlin. There he is.
Oh, wow. Yep.
He looks to me exactly like George Carlin did toward the end of his life.
That sun sure is high.
I don't know if George ever played any Southern characters. He certainly did a lot of movies. I like that he has, he's obligated to carry around the moonshine jug wherever he goes. And of course, we'll also get a still. We'll also get a moonshine still, and I believe it explodes. So that's yes, you see, and
which is how the trailer opens. If you go, you can find you can find the trailer online at various sites. Google it, and it opens with the explosion as the title card comes on, and it makes this film look as if it's got lots of sex and action in it.
You use the most exciting thing that happens in your movie. See, this is that moment I find funny, that they say the Lord moves in mysterious ways, and they both feel obligated to take their hats off. I mentioned Shakespeare, and I said, well, a lot of this is staged like a play. That interior of this houseboat, I guess, that they're living on. I noticed that Buford's last name is Anchors.
Yeah.
And in a way that mirrors his situation, because he's stuck in Mudcat Landing, and literally his boat has washed up on the shore, and he just left it there. And so it's sort of a guy who's been stuck in one place for a long time. Toward the end of the movie, there is the implication that perhaps Buford is finally going to get the boat moving again. Right. And finally move on down the river. But
thank you, Sister Melanie. Thank you very kindly.
He's been stuck in this place because he just decided, okay, Mudcat Landing is as good as anything else. He couldn't find anything else, I suppose. And of course, here we're getting the plot where our preacher friend knows all about the past of Valerie Allen's character, Melanie, when she was what Tiger Rose?
Tiger Rosie. Yep.
Tiger Rosie. And I would imagine that good old Ed Wood probably attended a lot of carnivals in his day and saw some real life Tiger Rosies. That's the other controversy of this film. Now, Ed Wood wrote his screenplay under the pseudonym Larry Lee, but the story of the film is credited to Jane Mann, who is the wife of Boris Petrov. And Jane's only credits are on Boris Petrov movies. And I found an interview with a screenwriter who said that basically what Jane did was act as a typist, and she just put her own name on the screenplay. So obviously Ed Wood definitely didn't need a typist. His typing skills were legendary. It's one of the most famous things about him was his legendary skill with a typewriter. I'm wondering how much of this story that Ed Wood wrote himself.
I would think the same, Joe, as I believe you're probably speculating that he wrote this pretty much ground up. Perhaps they gave him a cue. We want to do Beverly Hillbillies had premiered on TV the previous year. Do something along those lines, Ed. Right? That might have been the most detailed prompt he got.
Yeah, I don't think Ed would have needed a story prompt. And again, if you read his novels, if you read his short stories, not so much his movies. These kinds of characters don't turn up so much in Ed's movies. On the rare occasions when they do, I think you can draw a straight line from this movie to the briefly seen bumpkin character in Glen or Glenda, the one who's thinking, automobiles? Bah, they scare the horses. and he's, of course, chewing on a big straw, and he's got a big hat, like a big farmer's hat or a straw hat, and leaning on a pitchfork or something.
He would have been, Ed would have been familiar with, because of his father's family. His father had a lot of brothers and sisters, and they were raised on across the Hudson, across from Poughkeepsie on the west side. So upwards north is where they largely lived, and even a few of Ed's uncles worked farms up in the Catskills. So he would have known characters perhaps somewhat like this. And in fact, he started a jug band of his own in the late 1930s, the Sunshine Mountaineers. Yes. And so that was, again, capitalizing on the craze that was happening during the 1930s, mountain music.
Well, you forced me to bring up something here. If you watch Herschel Gordon Lewis's Hicksploitation pictures, one thing that you get in all of them is a lot of genuine mountain music. You get a lot of bluegrass.
Real banjos.
Right? Real banjos all the way through. Herschel loved that stuff, and he would slather it all over his movies, and you get none of that in Shotgun Wedding. In fact, the most prominent music, there is a score that goes through the whole film, but the most prominent music is the rock and roll that you hear over the opening credits and then during the wedding scene. And this was apparently created by a guy named Jerry Capehart. Mm-hmm. Now, Jerry was one of the rare people in this production who actually was from the South. I think he was from Missouri. But his claim to fame is being the manager to Eddie Cochran and the co-writer of a couple of Eddie Cochran's classic hits, Come On Everybody, and Summertime Blues. Mm-hmm. So Jerry Capehart was a pioneer of rock and roll, but I don't know that his music belongs in this film necessarily. Now, here we have this wonderful scene that shows you how good this print is. William Schallert is about to go into the store to make a phone call, and look at that extra in the background wearing the Arby's hat, and he has, as you called it, the Soggy Bottom Boys beard. And just look at our shopkeep with the yellow shirt and the horn-rimmed glasses, and you see these other wonderful extras in the background in this place. And all this was mud in the previous versions of this. And now you're seeing all this wonderful detail. And of course, we're getting some plot out of the way here, because Stacko Perkins, the con man, is talking to Steelo, the strong man, and we're getting some carnival footage.
Which looks like a very modern carnival.
Very modern carnival. And yeah, this guy, I believe, is another one-film wonder. Could be Will Ferrell's older brother, I think. And he gives a very stiff performance, but it gets an important plot point out of the way, which is that Steelo the strong man not only did not die when Valerie shot at him, but doesn't even care about her anymore.
Oh, buddy, I got a surprise for you, a real surprise. I just seen Rosie. Well, that's great, just great.
She absconded with $3,000 and shot him, and yeah, he's very forgiving.
he's like, I've got a new partner. I don't even care. She's a bad risk. And I suppose William Schallert was trying to use this to blackmail Melanie into doing what? I don't know. So I don't know why this is such a disappointment. But when William Schallert finds out that Steelo the Strongman is alive and holds no grudge, he says a great line. What a fink world, he says. And to me, that is another classic Ed Woodism. That is something that Ed would definitely have said. And we haven't even pointed out in this movie, you can see one on the table there, I think, the giant pipes that the guys are all smoking. Well, that also comes from Lil Abner, Well, here we go. Here's something that definitely doesn't come from Lil Abner.
We've had Honeybee taking a shower, and now we have Melanie in the bath. So, of course, that's to evoke the notion that something not just below the edge of the tub, something more alluring.
See, but the thing is, if you watch Petticoat Junction, you can watch Betty Joe, Bobby Joe, and Billy Joe. They're bathing in the water tower. You're basically getting as much as you'd be getting here. This is a movie. People are getting babysitters and going out. They're having to make plans. They're having to drive to the drive-in or something to go see this movie. They had to plunk down money to see this thing. You got to give them a little bit more than Valerie Allen in a bathtub. Now, she has very nice legs, and it's nice to see her wash her legs, but a little something, a belly button occasionally. I don't know. Now, this is also one of my favorite moments is when he says, how does it look in the back? And he says, terrible, which is not what you want to hear right before you get married. With this look, J. Pat O'Malley could have been doing stand-up in the 70s and 80s. He's got the blazer going. Unfortunately, J. Pat, he died in the mid-1980s. He was on an episode of Taxi called The Road Not Taken. It's a beautiful episode. Definitely check it out. He was supposedly the previous dispatcher at Sunshine Cab until Louis De Palma, played by Danny DeVito, drove him out of the job. J. Pat was from Lancashire, England, but he was from an Irish family, and he had an Irish accent. And you can sometimes hear that come out when he's trying to talk to his son. He's supposed to be trying to do a Southern accent to this movie. And I think he mostly has a handle on it. This isn't a realistic Southern accent, but I think it's good enough for broad sort of sketch comedy. J. Pat O'Malley has an infamous history with accents. He was supposedly the dialect coach for Dick Van Dyke on Mary Poppins. So Dick Van Dyke would blame his terrible Cockney accent on J. Pat O'Malley. He said, well, they gave me this Irishman, J. Pat O'Malley, to work with, and I don't think he had a better handle on it than I did. I don't think he knew anything more about a Cockney accent than I did. But there couldn't have been any rivalry between these two because J. Pat was also on the Dick Van Dyke Show. Now, this is where there's another place where this print really starts to pay off. You see Valerie Allen in a sheer purple nightie. And there are few outfits in this world that evoke Ed Wood as much as a sheer purple nightie. He loved the color purple, not as much as pink, but he loved purple, and he loved sheer clothing. And in this, you can really see how sheer it really is. To quote the sales lady from Glen or Glenda, you can see how sheer it really is. And this is about as much affection as Buford and Melanie ever get. He's going to go in, I think he's going to go in for the kiss here, and she's going to let him.
As long as he hasn't been chewing tobacco.
Yes. Yeah, I'm chewing. Okay, here we go. So J. Pat O'Malley got him a little something there in this movie. Woo, doggies. As Buddy Ebsen might have said.
Holy crap. This soup must be eaten up with.
Now, he wants to have a big wedding.
Hey, take it off and I'll rebuild.
None of this shotgun wedding. Now, since the wedding was her idea, basically, she's been sort of pressuring him.
I don't know why I have to wash Melanie.
Now, this is the scene that I think will resonate with anybody who doesn't get along with their step-parents. Basically, Melanie is like the stepmom to them now. Mm-hmm. And this is Lucianne and Rafe, and they're talking about their father's impending marriage to Melanie.
Hey, maybe I can get you the money you need to go off.
They don't like her.
Well,
They think that things are going to be worse when the baby gets here. And we didn't even point out, I think earlier, Valerie Allen says, I'm going to have a baby, B-A-B-B-Y. That's a very Ed Wood thing to do in the movies, is have people spell things out. And he always thinks it's funny to have people misspell something when they're spelling it out. That's Ed's idea of a big joke. But see, there she is tossing out the, I don't know,
what do you do, John?
what water? I have no idea. But and of course, she's yelling at him, get to work. Why aren't you doing your chores? And I think this is stereotypical of bad step-parent, step-kids relationship. She's like the wicked stepmother to them now. She's not really much older than they are.
And she's also involved with Chubb.
Chubb, yes, she's having an affair. And here we go. This is where the music of Cherry Capehart comes in. And the thing that's the real tease in this movie is, and there's Jenny Maxwell, lovely lady. The thing that's the real tease in this movie is that occasionally they will cut to the band in this movie. And the band looks like they're playing mountain music. They're playing bluegrass. But what you hear, obviously, is rock and roll. you know. So,
and then we're going to get the Dance Party USA number breaking out here momentarily.
You see, now, another great thing, you can see actually all the signs that they had printed up. And I would guess that in previous prints, you probably couldn't read those signs. Now they're clear as day. Revival meeting tonight here, Preacher Perkins, and revival meeting at 7:30. It's wonderful. But we'll get to that choreography in a moment. I wondered sometimes what the choreography was supposed to be, because they look like they're imitating Christmas trees almost. They get their arms like out at angles and they kind of walk like stiffly. And I wonder what that is supposed to be. Now, here we have more of this attraction between the preacher and Lucienne, but nothing really comes of this. And she asks him one of the loaded questions of cinema history. She says, "Have I got it?" And he doesn't answer. And you see that well, the thing is about William Shallert is I've seen William Shallert in a lot of movies and TV shows, and he's never getting the girl in these things. Like William Shallert's not getting much lady action in any of these things. There's the Christmas tree look. They're like, imitate a human Christmas tree that can somehow dance around. And apparently in this town of 47, there must be a pretty good dance school or dance academy. They're very much into modern dance. And there's some people doing some gymnastics there.
I think it looks like about half the town must be here at the wedding.
Well, yeah, that's why I say like 47. I'm maybe that sign is out of date, but there doesn't seem to be any shortage of ladies or eligible young men in this movie. So the main characters of this movie make you think, well, we only have 8 people in our lives to interact with, so we have to pair off with each other. And I was like, what are you talking about? There's this whole town full of these people. Ask some of these people out. I don't know if all the gentlemen are maybe available. Some of the ladies might be available. You know, who knows? And see, there's this band. They don't even know that no one's listening to them. The fashions are wonderful in this town. Although I would suppose that they're supposedly probably all making their own clothes in this town. I mean, yes, I can do a jump off the bench. Look at that. That's wonderful. Now, even though Valerie Allen is playing the bad girl, the femme fatale in this movie, I gotta say she looks mighty nice in the movie. She's very sexy in the film. Although I was very intrigued, I had to track it down. Valerie Allen is in an episode of Leave It to Beaver called Beaver Finds a Wallet. Beaver finds her wallet, in fact, and they have a nice little scene at the police station together. And Bill Shallert was such a good sport to do this. Obviously, his shirt didn't get muddy somehow. But this is the thing about this movie. We hear that he fell down in what they call the hog wallow or something, but we don't see any of it. He just walks in all covered in mud. Now, again, people made arrangements to go out to a movie theater to see this, Boris Petrov, at least show William Shallert falling into the mud. You know, we at least want to see him get, oh, wow. Now there you can see how powerful that moonshine really is. And there's our Romeo and Juliet. Oh, aren't they sweet?
Honeybee, incidentally, there was a exotic dancer who also appeared in mail order short films, burlesque films at the time, named Honeybee.
Maybe Ed was inspired by it.
I wondered that myself, yeah.
Honeybee. And this is a sort of a grotesque parody of a wedding, you know, where everybody's a phony, basically, and the preacher is just making this up as he goes along, and he's covered in mud. I'm just starting to wonder, like, what was the idea behind having them all covered in mud? And Shub Chubb is not happy about it. No. But the thing, okay, well, Shub Chubb there, he gets his revenge here at the end of this wedding scene because
quite brazenly.
it reminded me of a Carol Burnett sketch where Carol has just gotten married to a character played by Paul Sands, and Carol's bride is just making out blatantly with all the other guys, and the husband is getting very jealous. Yeah, and here's the still.
Yeah,
here's the still, and I couldn't have been more surprised that this guy used to be a child actor. You can almost see it in his face. You can almost see, I bet that moonshine tastes something terrible. Well, I keep threatening someday to write an article for Ed Wood Wednesdays called The Ed Wood Experience. And what that's going to be is I'm going to buy an Angora sweater, and I'm going to buy a bottle of Imperial whiskey, which was Ed's whiskey of choice. And I'm going to type a story on an old-fashioned typewriter while wearing the sweater and drinking the whiskey, and I'm going to try to explain what that's like. And I think my reaction is going to be a lot like what Silas's reaction was. Oh, now, I like in this scene, they keep coming up with reasons for Jenny Maxwell to strip down to her bra twice.
Right.
Earlier in the film, Silas said that she looked like September Morn. And I thought that was the name of a stripper or an exotic dancer, but actually it was the name of a painting that was done in 1911. It was a French painting that was reproduced many, many times. Silas said he saw it in a calendar, which is plausible, and he said he never forgot it. And it looked like an occasion of sin to him. And what it is, it's a painting of a nude woman standing in shallow water. What makes it dirty is that she's covering herself up. The nude in art is obviously a very popular motif, but the fact that she's covering herself up makes you think like, we're seeing something that we shouldn't be seeing.
Kind of like the shower scene, the bathtub scene.
Exactly. So
it also reminds me, Joe. So when this movie was released, the posters for the film actually had in bigger print and bigger font than the title of the movie, Shotgun Wedding. It's a child bride. Bride. So there was, of course, a infamous exploitation film from the late 1930s called Child Bride. This doesn't really have anything to do with that.
It does not. And in fact, when I originally announced my intention to review this movie, Shotgun Wedding, which I promise you is G-rated and all the actors are of age and there's nothing even remotely untoward in it, some people thought I was going to review that Child Bride movie from 1938 or so. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I'm not reviewing that film. It has nothing to do with Ed Wood. I wouldn't review that film. The ad campaign for this movie is completely tasteless. There's a tagline, was she too old at 15? The focal point of the ad campaign was Jenny Maxwell.
Right.
They really were banking on her appearance, which is why I think so many people will be, I don't know that they'll necessarily be disappointed because you get to pretend like you're seeing her take a shower. She does strip down to her bra a couple of times in that previous scene. For the most part, this is what I would call G-rated filth or G-rated smut. We're sort of barreling toward the third act of this movie where all the threads are going to come together. And I said in my original review that if this were a Russ Meyer movie, this is when he would start getting violent with it. You have these characters scheming, and there's talk about money being hidden. In Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, I believe the mean old man actually has money stashed away in his wheelchair. In this, I think he's stashed it in a moonshine bottle. Yeah, moonshine jug. And there's a big dumb character in Faster Pussycat as well called the Vegetable. Russ would have had people start dying in the third act.
We have a gun-toting posse. Silas has put together a posse, and they're going to wipe out the Anchors clan, so they're preparing you for that. We'll see if that happens.
I think Melanie here would have been one of the first to go because, you see in this movie, okay, we have Lucienne who's sort of blonde. We have Honeybee who's very blonde. And then we have Melanie who has dark hair. And she is the darkest of the three women morally. You can tell how pure the girl is by the color of her hair. Dark hair, she's the most sinful. Sort of blondish hair, she's kind of in the middle there. And then the innocent girl, our ingenue, has very, very blonde hair and blue eyes and pale complexion. She's the untouched, well, not untouched, obviously, but she's as close as this movie has to sort of an innocent virginal heroine.
Yeah.
And so the fallen woman, though, in this thing is Melanie, who remains bad to the end, which I like. They don't try to change her or try to make her nice. But I think Russ would have killed her.
Or if it were a slasher movie, she would be she'd be the first to go, right?
Well, yeah, because the fallen woman is always in the horror movies is the first to go.
Good grief, what's going on now?
She wants my whole 100.
Lucienne is going to rat on Shub/Chubb here. At this point, would Buford even care?
You can drop dead.
They're all sort of like morally dubious. What's he going to be like that offended? Here we see a poor Jenny Maxwell trying to run across this bumpy terrain. There she always looks very uncomfortable doing that. And now we're getting the posse going. And you notice they must have set up this western town out in the middle of this desert, this fake western town, and they try to make this saloon as generic as possible.
Oh, just you can see the power lines in the background.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can see the sign that just says beer. They don't even try to. Oh, there's the power lines. And my guess is that they set all this up in the hopes that movie and TV crews would come out here and film. But I think the thing that would, again, have prevented it is just the heat. There you see it. A car that has to be cranked up to go. I had a crazy uncle who used to try to build cars out of kits. And he would build those old-timey cars. And he had one that he would drive around in. I don't know why he decided to do it, but he would buy up old mail trucks and things like that. But I remember he got one of those old-timey cars, and I remember riding with him in some kind of parade. That was kind of exciting.
Why'd you make him do that?
Never mind.
Let's go back real quick to Jane Mann and Larry Lee.
Oh, sure.
So the three films that Jane Mann's credited for, all directed by Boris Petrov, are all in some form or fashion related to Ed, at least tangentially. The Unearthly stars Tor Johnson as the character Lobo. It's a different version of Lobo than we've got in Night of the Ghouls and Bride of the Monster. But Anatomy of a Psycho, it is often rumored that Ed participated perhaps in writing the screenplay or at least in some consulting capacity. This, which presumably, he's the Larry Lee pseudonym. Now, Joe, Talk Sexy Y'all, right? Is
right.
Would be the presumably the original screenplay title.
Talk Sexy Y'all, which is very, very Ed, because I don't know that anyone actually talks about all that sexy in this thing, but. Yeah, that's supposedly the working title of this. And I think Ed would use both titles on various resumes of his. So sometimes if a movie of his was known under different titles, he would sometimes include both titles on his resume to make it look as though he'd made two movies rather than one.
Yeah. By this point, he'd written quite a few screenplays that were directed by others, even television shows back in the early 50s. But at this point, Sinister Urge is a couple years in the rear view. The last film he had directed in 1961, and that would be a fallow period for him as a director all the way until he would get back into the driver's seat making feature films, sex films in 1969.
Yeah, he was basically a writer for hire for a lot of the 60s.
In fact, his writing career really kicks off right around the time when this movie was produced. His first known paperback, Black Lace Drag, aka better known as Killer and Drag, was first published in 1963.
Right. This was when Ed was transitioning away from being a director. Of course, though, he had filmmaking in his heart. The question then remains, what if Ed had directed this himself?
Yeah.
And Boris Petrov was a Russian-born fellow, but a dyed-in-the-wool schlockmeister, Mr. Low Budget, but very professional and I think very conventional in his thinking,
right,
in a lot of ways. And I think what somebody like Boris Petrov brought to this was just a sense of professionalism and normalcy. And I think there might be more erratic editing and maybe some weirder choice of shots in an Ed Wood movie if Ed had directed this himself. That's what you tend to see when other directors direct Ed's scripts, is that they bring a sense of normalcy to it or a sense of professionalism. And weirdly, for some fans, that is a bonus, because they sometimes get impatient with Ed's eccentricities as a film director and his odd choice of shots and things like that.
Yeah, this is very much classical scene construction. I actually thought to myself, thinking about this, the film is sort of innocuous. To your point, it's not all that funny. It's not all that sexy. It's not all that violent. There's not all that much action in it. There's a lot of talk, though. Right?
Yes. I guess
a lot of dialogue.
Yes, there is a lot of talk. Maybe that's why it was going to be called Talk Sexy Y'all, because they can't actually show sexy y'all. You get the shotgun wielding posse together, and no one is killed at all. And this, you see, this is the Shakespearean ending. You see, where all the threads of the plot are coming together improbably in a big public scene where all the characters converge at once. Maybe you can explain this to me, because I've seen this film now 2 or 3 times, and I still don't quite get why Silas, the rival dad, changes his mind on his daughter marrying Rafe. Like, why? Like,
it's rather unprovoked and sudden. And now he becomes the biggest supporter of the two getting married.
Yes, he's like,
we got to go find a real preacher. Yeah.
And yeah. Poor J. Pat O'Malley is learning that, of course, he never really was married to the wonderful Valerie Allen. But, I guess the smutty part of this movie is all implied, because earlier in the film, J. Pat O'Malley said that we already had the honeymoon, now we need the wedding. So presumably, Buford and Melanie have been sharing a bed this time.
He did believe that she could have been indeed pregnant. So
yes, so and I guess she might have gone all the way with Shub as well, possibly. So again, Melanie, there's a whole town full of guys
who can dance really, really well. They dress very nicely.
They might be too into choreography. They might be too into choreography for you, but there's a whole town of guys. You don't really have to limit yourself to this one family if you don't really want to. And you see how, gosh, she's so mad all the time in this movie. She's just so angry all the time, which is why it's nice to see her on Leave It to Beaver, because she's calm and she's nice and she talks friendly to little Beaver Cleaver. She and Jerry Mathers have a nice little scene. And there's that smile. There's that wonderful smile. See, William Shallert never gets angry in movies or TV shows. He's not that type. And I got to say, for the limited budget that they had, I think the houseboat set is actually pretty good. I think, you know, it's believable.
Right.
And I'm not sure what river this is supposed to be. I don't know if this is supposed to be the mighty Mississippi or something. But, and you know, he's running away. He'll be back in a car pretty soon. And now Silas, who I guess is supposed to be the mountain man as opposed to the river trash. He's supposed to be mountain trash, as opposed to river trash. Well, you see, that reminds me of Snuffy Smith, because Snuffy Smith is a hillbilly comic strip, and it takes place up in the mountains. And they look with contempt on so-called flatlanders. You know, so hill people and flatlanders don't get along.
Right. It's Hatfield and McCoy, obviously, and which again is partly culturally rooted in Romeo and Juliet. My favorite version of it, Joe, is Hillbilly Hair with Bugs Bunny.
Oh, yes.
It don't matter, we ain't
Oh, and look, you can see Shub. He's looking on because he's waiting for his chance to get away. Now, you see, this is where some good blocking is happening, because you have this conversation between the two main characters in the foreground, but then in the wide shots, you can see that the third character is looking in on their conversation, is spying on them. And there he comes in, you see.
I'm going too, Pa.
He's going to take her away. And
We're going away together. Come on, honey.
she gives him like $200, I believe. And she says, you know, go to the big city, you'll make it. And I was like, I think he's barely making it in Mudcat Landing.
Sure is nice being away, Melanie.
I don't know that he's necessarily going to make it in the big city.
Well,
But
and if it were a Ed Wood paperback, he would end up going to the big city and he would end up working the streets.
well, that's what happens to Ed Wood. In Ed Wood's characters, the bumpkins who go to the big city always end up getting cheated and robbed, and they wind up out on the streets. And I was developing a theory that Ed Wood writes about that because maybe he feels like that's what happened to him in Los Angeles. You know, he was coming to the big city and he got taken advantage of. And I don't know if this is the same car that we saw earlier, if they had more than one of these vintage cars, but it's a beautiful thing to see these old cars. And poor Shub. Poor Jethro / Lil Abner / Shub / Chub. Now, every time I see him coming out of that outhouse, I can't help but think of that meme with Shrek coming out of the outhouse.
What a shame.
Moonshine Still.
Still exploded. He's
the moonshine
heartbroken. He's
sticks.
heartbroken. Clearly, we've got a little over a minute to go here. So, real quick, the movie, Joe, it did disappear relatively quickly from sight. It played drive-ins for a couple of years up until maybe around 1967 on second build most often. Made a brief appearance 1971 again, and outside of that, more or less disappeared from the face of the earth. Here's the replacement Melanie coming down from the Ozarks, and here we go again.
Here we go again. And well, you see, this is the kind of movie that you can't play in the same town more than a week or so, because after week one, the word will get out. You know, people will say, you're going to see Shotgun Wedding, don't bother. You know, there's it's all just a lot of talk. So this is one where you have to kind of just take the money and run, and then re-release it under a different title, hopefully, and maybe trick people into seeing it again. But it's beautiful seeing it in this print. This was a beautiful print.
Indeed. And I appreciate you joining me here, Joe. Thanks for all the insights. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary. I hope you enjoyed the film.
Yeah. Enjoy this print. And hopefully we're waiting for the next Arcota Productions Inc. film to come out.
So we'll keep waiting. Thanks, everybody.